There we are. Now we are now recording. My name is Will Hull, and this will be Unit 2 for Kansas Division C, hearing for the We the People National Finals. In a moment, I will have the judges introduce themselves, followed by the students, and then we will begin the hearing. Students will deliver a 4-minute prepared statement, followed by 8 minutes of judges' questions. My microphone will be muted during the hearing, and I'll hold up a 1-minute sign, as well as a time sign to show you where we are in that period of the hearing. I suggest that you use the gallery view to see everyone on the screen. It's in the top right-hand corner underneath view in your Zoom window there to be able to see everyone. And at the conclusion of the hearing, the judges will give brief feedback to the team, and then we will go ahead and conclude. At this point, I'll go ahead and pass the microphone over to our judging panel, and thank you very much.
Thanks so much. My name is Julie Silverbrook. I am the Senior Director of Partnerships and Constitutional Scholar in Residence at iCivics, and I will invite my other judges to go ahead and introduce themselves.
Good afternoon. My name is Tim Igo. I am a writer, lawyer, and magazine editor at the State Bar of Arizona in Phoenix.
Mick Drummond. I'm an assistant professor of political science at Black Hills State University in South Dakota.
And I'm Nick Sullivan. I'm a senior at Blue Valley Northwest High School, and next year I plan on studying engineering at the University of Kansas.
My name is Emma Johnson. I'm a senior at Blue Valley Northwest High School, and I plan to attend the University of Missouri to double major in strategic communications and political science.
And my name is Amita Ganesh. I'm also a senior at Blue Valley Northwest High School, and next year I plan to double major in economics and public policy at George Washington University. And we are all in Mr. Thomas's We the People class in Overland Park, Kansas.
Terrific. I'm going to go ahead and let you know which question you'll be answering. I will then read that question to you in full. You will be answering question 1, and I will now read that to you. What were the major disagreements among the 55 delegates during the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, and how were they resolved? What issues, if any, were not resolved, and what were the consequences? What changes, if any, should be made to the Constitution? You may begin whenever you're ready.
Issues at the forefront of arguments at the Constitutional Convention were representation and slavery. When it came to representation, there were 2 main disagreements: whether the people should elect the lower house, and how states would be represented in a seemingly fair manner. Some delegates opposed the general public electing the lower house as they believed citizens were easily misled. Others, however, believed it would allow for elected officials to sympathize with all members of their constituency.
However, the larger issue in regard to representation was how states would be represented in Congress. Under the Articles of Confederation, each state had 1 vote, but James Madison was now proposing that states' vote should depend on their population as stated in the Virginia Plan. States with smaller populations combated this plan by proposing the New Jersey Plan, which would give each state an equal number of votes, but both failed upon when voted upon.
The delegates eventually agreed to the Connecticut Compromise, which determined that representation in the lower house would be chosen by the people and based on the white population plus 3/5 of its enslaved population. Moreover, the upper house, which would be voted on by state legislature, would have equal representation among all states.
Perhaps the most infamous arguments revolving around slavery as a fundamental disagreement occurred as the economy of southern states depended on it while northern delegates opposed it. Arguments arose over Congress's power to limit slavery, but inaction was the ultimate solution, and those who supported slavery received what they desired. Congress could not tax exports, and the importation of enslaved people from the triangular slave trade would not be banned until 1808. The Constitution furthermore provided de facto approval of slavery with the Fugitive Slave Clause and the 3/5 Clause, which reduced enslaved people to less than a person.
The inability to pass any substantial legislation on slavery and the fact that the term slave nor slavery was directly mentioned in the Constitution was detrimental for the United States. The founders should have pressed harder against slavery because the invention of the cotton gin fundamentalized the practice. Since the framers did not fully resolve the issue of slavery, disagreements remained prevalent in the 1860s, ultimately becoming a cause of the Civil War.
Another unresolved issue was the lack of definition of natural citizenship, as it tied closely with voting rights. It was not until the 14th Amendment was added in 1866, 79 years after the Constitution was signed, that national citizenship was clearly defined. Without this definition, founders left voting rights up to the states, which allowed states to discriminate and choose who they wanted to grant voting privileges. State governments used this to their advantage by implementing poll tax, the grandfather clause, and literacy tests, which all targeted African Americans.
As time has progressed, changes largely unforeseen by the founders should be made to the Constitution regarding representation in Congress. The first policy change that should be made is the implementation of the Wyoming Rule. After the 1930 census, the House was capped at 435 representatives. Due to this, the United States has the largest population to representative ratio among industrialized democracies, with 1 representative to every 747,184 people.
The Wyoming Rule was introduced as a replacement of the Reapportionment Act of 1929 to make the population of Wyoming, the smallest state, the basis for representation. If this were to go into effect, the House would range from 545 to 547 members. The Wyoming Rule could be a key way to assert equal power by making sure districts have approximately the same population across the country, while allowing representatives to represent their constituencies better. The other policy change that should be included is the addition of term limits for members of Congress. Adding term limits of elected representatives allow for legislative diversity, and the protection of incumbency is removed.
The 90% re-election rate has allowed for a quarter of Congress to become tenured representatives as they have been in office for upwards of 16 years. By implementing this, members of Congress are empowered to serve their constituents and make a difference in their limited time in office. The Constitution gave us a solid framework for starting this nation, but the world has changed drastically since 1787, and the Constitution must reflect these changes. We are now ready for your questions.
I'm going to invite Judge Igo to ask the first question on term limits, since you left off with that.
Sure, I'm fascinated by I love the strong position. So let me ask this, given your position on term limits for Congress, can you explore for me challenges to that? Not just political challenges, but challenges for the new lawmaker that may take 2, 3, 4 years even to get up to speed. And also they're surrounded by lifetime bureaucrats who ultimately will be the only ones with any kind of deep-seated, long-time experience in government. How will this work for Americans?
Challenges they would run into is, if they wanted to start implementing this, would you start with existing politicians, or would this only start with the newly elected politicians? Because we have, of course, people who've been in Congress and Senate for a long time wouldn't be super thrilled about losing those positions. And so that's definitely something we would have to consider.
The more racking support for it most likely would be difficult, but with the right build up to the American people and the benefits outweighing the eventual downsides, and most likely support would be able to be brought up eventually.
Truly the greatest challenge is you would be having members of Congress, essentially getting rid of their own tenures with these. And so you somehow have to convince them that this was the right move for the American people, even if it does harm their own job security.
So let me clarify, because maybe I wasn't clear. I'm curious, of course they would oppose that, but I'm wondering whether we would want a new lawmaker with 0 days experience getting in, knowing they only have a couple years, and they're surrounded by a bureaucracy that takes 5 years to learn. How does that work?
I think our biggest support was the fact that you have this limited time in office would encourage you to try to get everything done as quickly as you can, and that you can't really take the time that it normally does, and you are serving your constituency more validly because you aren't worrying so much about this re-election, that you know that you can do whatever you think is best and put whatever you want to on the line and not worrying about that.
Building upon Emma, the threat of incumbency does promote the idea that you can take that time to learn the ropes, to not get as much done in Congress. With this fast-paced term limits, you are doing better for your constituents, you are fighting for policy changes, and overall that would benefit the nation as a whole.
Thank you.
I return to a point you raised about expanding the number of representatives in Congress. And I'm curious if you would limit that to the House of Representatives, or if you would also be open to expanding the number of senators.
Right now, our case for the Wyoming Rule mainly applies to the House of Representatives because we respect the anti-federalist idea that each state should have an equal number of senators. But going to the House of Representatives, we believe that it should be based off population. But right now, it is not. States are not given an equal representation exactly. And with this Wyoming Rule, it would allow for equal representation.
I would have to furthermore respectfully disagree with my colleague, because the arguments have been made since 1995, I believe, that the Senate needs reapportionment of some sort, whether this be through referendums, as Akil Rita Moore has explored in the past, or people radically oppose the abolition of the Senate even, but by including reapportionment, possibly preserving federalism by having one delegate guaranteed in the Senate per state, and possibly expanding the Senate over 100 seats to maybe 110 or so, and doing so by population, you are ensuring representation is proportionate by state as well. As times have changed and the population has increased drastically.
So I like that you guys disagree with each other, and I want to just push for some explanation in terms of difference. So Nick, for you, why do you want to keep the Senate at its current size? And Amita, for you, why are you open to expanding it? And why would you limit yourself to only adding 10 additional seats?
So I believe that keeping the Senate capped at 2 senators per each state gives equal representation to each state, and it allows for the smaller states to have an equal say as the larger states, whereas in the House of Representatives, the states with larger populations have a much larger voice than the smaller states. So if we can give the smaller population states an equal say in the Senate, then it would maintain the idea that was created at the Constitutional Convention.
And while my opinion's drifting further away than the founding ideals and this belief in keeping 2 senators and representation by equal representation per state, because times have changed, the population has increased so drastically. I mean, since the 1930s, when the House itself was capped, the population has already doubled, and it's time that the Senate has equal representation in the House. And by not capping it at 100 seats in the Senate, if you were to do so, then most states would be guaranteed 1 representative. However, states such as California would have 12. When you're looking at the Wyoming Rule in specific, states such as Wyoming would have 1 representative, as would a state like Kansas, when Wyoming has 1/6 of the population, I believe. By expanding it to 110 representatives, the research has been done to show that you can have more, you can distribute the amount of representatives more equally and fairly per state.
Thank you.
One of the major points of contention at the convention, and certainly in the newspapers thereafter, was about the appropriate size of a republic. Can you discuss this debate? What were the major disagreements, and where do you fall within that debate?
Could you elaborate a little bit more about what you mean of the appropriate size of the republic?
Sure. So pointing at Federalist 10 would be helpful. Madison's theory, where he challenges Montesquieu and anti-federalists who wanted the republic to remain small. They were convinced that if you go too big, a lot of things are going to break down. That's the debate I'm talking about. Maybe you could speak to that.
Would you re-ask the question now? Sorry.
Sure. So during the convention, one of the major points of contention was about the appropriate size of the debate. Can you discuss this debate? What were the major disagreements, and what side do you support and why?
I would say I support the fact that they worked towards having a stronger central government. I think it's something that we really needed because the articles did not protect that in any way. And if we wanted to be a nation that was taken seriously and that could be in worldly affairs, could work with other countries, I think that you have to have that strong central government there as the base to democracy.
And the federalism system of government would help this, because as America expanded, they granted specific powers to the state legislatures while also having a federal government that would have their own powers. So it's not like completely, it's just one government, but giving the state governments powers really allowed it for the republic to be successful, even though it's over a very big area of land.
Probably have about 30 seconds left if you want to share any additional thoughts, but we don't have enough time to ask another question. Okay, if there are no other closing thoughts, I think we'll go ahead and give feedback, some constructive feedback. I think you guys did a great job, especially walking us through the legislative branch, the question of representation, expansion of the House of Representatives, brought up term limits. You stayed pretty well focused on the legislative branch, didn't bring up the other branches of government. Obviously, the delegates did spend the bulk of their time on the legislature, but it would have been nice to see reference to the presidency and the Supreme Court as well. And I would have liked to have seen some more direct citations to historical primary source documents. I did appreciate Amita bringing up Professor Amar and citing to him and to his proposal. And I appreciated the citation to the Wyoming Rule, which is the first we've heard of that in our judging today. Overall, I think you did a nice job. It was a polished presentation and you had good participation across the board. I'll let my colleagues weigh in with their feedback as well.
So I would agree with that. I was impressed by the conversation, the depth of it, the Wyoming Rule again. You're breaking news here with us today. It's the first time we heard about this today, so I appreciate that. I also appreciated your mentioning things like the poll tax, literacy test, and grandfather clauses. Though that's an opportune moment to connect us all to how the constitutional issues are vital today. And those questions continue to be unresolved, as we're seeing in legislatures across the country passing even more restrictive voting laws. So, and I know that you're thinking that, but it's helpful to close the loop for us and to make us know that you're thinking that. And I loved the phrase that inaction was the ultimate solution. I'm going to steal that. And I think that's exactly the case. So thank you so much.
Well, you did a very nice job. I really liked the participation by all of you. I felt like all of you had something important to say and you took the opportunity to say it. With my question, what I was looking for was really the majority faction's argument of Madison, why a large republic, he argued, would actually benefit the republic, whereas the anti-federalists were worried about things like civic virtue being eroded by the size, diversity, and complexity of a large republic. But I thought you did a great job zeroing in on one of the solutions, which is federalism. And Nick, you brought up the point about how, as the republic continued to grow, federalism would be one way to mitigate some of the concerns of that. So overall, very nice job.